Sight reading is super powerful and the number one skill you want to develop if you want to learn pieces 10 times faster. So that's why in today's lesson, I'm going to give you the best instructions on how to sight read so that you can pave the way to faster and more satisfying progress. It's important that you first understand the goal of sight reading, which is being able to play through a passage of music with as few mistakes as possible. And by sight reading regularly, you're going to train yourself to learn new passages much faster. So the first tip I have for you is to sight read something a little bit below your current playing level so that you'll be able to play it from beginning to end. So if the current pieces you're working on look like this, then the sight reading examples you're working on will probably look more like this. And this is going to have huge implications on how you approach mistakes because it's going to be totally different than how you approach mistakes when you're learning a piece normally. First, I'm going to show you what not to do and listen carefully to see if you can pick it out. Ready? That was totally wrong. And if you don't know why it's wrong, well, it's because, remember what I said in the beginning, that sight reading is about being able to play from the beginning of the section to the end of the section because the whole thing is training you being able to read new sections of music. But what I did was I made a mistake and then I started over from the beginning. That is not what you want to do. When you make a mistake, you want to keep on going, and what you want to do instead is take a mental note where you made a mistake on your first playthrough and play it through one more time, trying to correct as many mistakes as possible. Don't play it more than twice because the more you play it, the less it is sight reading, and the more it is you're just learning a regular piece. We do have one advantage to our disposal when we're learning how to sight read, and actually is going to make a huge difference in the outcome of how the playthrough goes when we're sight reading, and it's this. Listen carefully. We can take as much time as we need, unless you're doing an audition or something, but we can take as much time as we need to analyze the piece before we play it at all, and this is going to make a huge difference. And here's a list of a few things you want to look out for when you sight read so that it goes a lot better. One is the clef. Now, I picked this example for a very specific reason, and that specific reason is that normally we expect things to start in treble clef, with our hand up here, and bass clef with our hand down there. But this one throws us for a loop because it's actually double treble clef up top, treble clef on the bottom. And all that means is that your right hand's probably going to be playing a little bit higher than where the middle of the piano is, and your left hand is actually going to be playing in the middle of the piano. And they write it in treble clef for the left hand because the notes would be really high up on the staff if they wrote it in bass clef. So the first thing you should look out for is the clef. The second thing to look out for is the time signature. We have CC here, which stands for common time or 4/4 time. If you're not familiar with their time signatures and rhythm, highly recommend you check out some of the videos on the channel about that. Next thing you want to be on the lookout for is the key signature. And luckily for us, there's nothing written here at all. So if there's nothing written, that tells us 0 sharps, 0 flats. That makes things a little easier for us. It also tells us that we're probably more than likely in the key of C. So our hands are going to be centered over C position. Okay, there weren't any sharps or flats in the key signature. However, there are sharps and flats in what we call the accidentals, which is funny because the composers put them in there purposefully, but they're called accidentals, and they're just sharps or flats that are not in the key signature, right? And you want to be on the lookout for those because those ones are more likely to trip you up because they're outside of the normal key. But just taking a look here, it looks like we got some F sharps here in that measure, and then the next measure right over, they return back to an F natural. Other than accidentals, one more thing I'm going to be on the lookout for, actually two things I see with my eye. One are rests, so you want to make sure you're paying attention to those as much as possible. The tendency, like with measures like this in the left hand, is to keep holding all throughout the measure, but as you can see, if I do that, when I get to that F natural there, it clashes. So make sure you're paying attention to those rests. And then the last thing I see here at the very end, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can see it right there, are repeat signs. So we're going to be playing through the top line twice and the bottom line twice. Now, you're maybe thinking, Tim, I can't keep track of all this stuff in my head. And hey, that's okay. Pick out as much of it as you can and then do your best giving it a playthrough, which brings me to my next tip, actually, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, is that there's no time limit getting through this piece. I know it says moderato, but when you're sight reading, I would say it's layered on like a cake. So the most important thing are the right notes, right? And then the next layer of the cake is the right rhythm. So this is in order of priority: right notes, right rhythm. And then I would say after that are like paying attention to the rests and the little details. And then I would say dynamics is, towards the top of the cake, it's less important. And then like the smallest part of the cake is probably things like repeats and things like that. So when you first play through it, you really want to focus on getting the right notes and right rhythms. And then maybe on the second playthrough, try to add in as many of those details as you can and just do your best, because it's practicing sight reading regularly that's going to develop it as a skill in the long run. It's not about getting every little playthrough perfect. So I have a story about how I came across sight reading, and it was all the way back when I was auditioning for Westchester way back in the day, almost 20 years ago. It's really hard to believe. But anyway, I was taking the audition or preparing for it, and they give you an audition sheet of what you need to practice. And on one of the pages was sight reading. And I go, hey, Mr. Armstrong, what's sight reading? And he goes, being able to look at a piece of music for the first time and being able to play it. And I go, that's not possible. Because my skills just weren't there at the time. I didn't think it was possible. But we kept practicing. I guess I did well enough in the audition because I did get into Westchester. But sight reading came up again at the end of every marking period, or whatever they call it, semester, I think is the word, where we had to do what was called juries, where we had to play in front of like a jury of all the professors. It was actually pretty nerve-wracking. No other instrument, I don't think, had to do that the same way. Maybe they did. I don't know. Regardless, is that I had to do it again for juries. And I remember I played it so bad one time that my professor, Dr. Craig, came up to me and he goes, I have rhythm students, percussion students that can sight read piano better than you can. And it was kind of a little demoralizing at the time, but I thought about it and it made me practice sight reading a lot more. And trust me that when you give this a chance and you get good at it, you will be able to pick up new material a lot faster, and it makes learning a lot more enjoyable. Okay, it's time for 3 sight reading tips. One I sort of went over already, so we're going to go through it quickly. Number 1 is when you're sight reading, make sure you sight read and play very slow. Even though it says moderato there, you can really take your time. There's no time limit getting through these. Remember what I said about the layered cake. What's at the bottom? The foundation of the cake. The biggest part is the right notes, right? So concentrate on getting that and make sure you go nice and slow. Next, I didn't talk about this one yet, and it's very, very important. That is to count out a measure before you start playing. This will help set the right tempo and make sure you're starting with the right rhythms, at least hopefully. So I would do something like this. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, ready, play. And I came in at a nice consistent tempo that wasn't too fast. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, ready, play, I know that it's too fast going right into it. I can feel it in the counting. So count out a measure before you start. And the last tip before we get into the next section of the lesson here is that you want to take a deep breath. It can be kind of nerve-wracking getting all of these details into each playthrough. So before you start playing, take a nice deep breath. It does actually help calm you down. There's a reason, you grow up your whole life and they go, hey, take a deep breath, when you're feeling anxious. It really does work. It might not make all your anxiety go away, but take a deep breath. Okay, we have 3 main sections in this lesson left. One is basically I want to tell you about a sight reading book series, or how you can find sight reading examples. After that, we're going to talk about how to improve at sight reading, just a couple of tips there. And then we're going to finish out the lesson. I'm going to play some examples for you. We actually have quite a bit left. And then we're going to finish it out with some frequently asked questions and actually have a bonus section after that. So we have plenty to go. Let's get on to it. So you may be asking, Tim, where do I learn sight reading? How do I practice it? Where do I find sight reading examples to play? And this one I highly recommend, Improve Your Sight Reading. It's by Paul Harris. Find it on Amazon or pretty much everywhere. I believe there's 7 or 8 books in the series. You obviously want to start with level 1. And I really like this series because it starts out easiest at the beginning of the book, which is the most approachable. And then it also has little pieces of information about each thing that you play so that you can analyze it a bit better. I recommend going through maybe 1 or 2 of these examples a day. You don't have to sight read a ton, but you do want to do it as regular as possible. And say you don't have any sight reading books around, but you do have plenty of piano lesson books, particularly ones with pieces you've never played before. So maybe you've learned all the Alfred books, but you have some Faber books lying around, which is like a competing book series, right? They have different pieces in them. Well, if you've learned the Alfred, book 1, maybe you want to go through and sight read the Faber book 1, right? If you've learned that a while ago. So the point is if you have extra piano music lying around, especially if it's in a collection of books where the book starts out easy and gets more difficult, that's perfect for sight reading. Just make sure you follow all the tips I gave you today. And another thing that if you have laying around is really good for sight reading, although it's a little bit more advanced, is a church hymnal. This is good for a lot of reasons. You're playing different voices between different hands. But I would start with the easy sight reading books first and work your way up to those. Okay, now time for a new section in the videos, which is frequently asked questions. These are questions that I've gotten in the comments a lot throughout the years, and also questions I see online of people interested in sight reading and what they're asking. So are you ready? So question 1 is there a specific speed I should play the sight reading examples? And if you've been paying attention, the answer is not really. You want to be able to play them from beginning to end. However, if you are more advanced at sight reading and you want an extra challenge, right, try to play it up to speed right from the get-go. Again, you want to have some experience already doing that. But that answers that question. Next, this question is actually going to test to see if you've been paying attention, because I actually want you to answer this before I do. Are you ready? The question is, how do I avoid mistakes if I haven't played the piece before? You should be able to answer this. There's a list of, maybe 3 to 5 things you want to be on the lookout for before you play. See if you can list those out right now. Press pause. This is a great question. Can I leave out notes if they are too difficult? The answer is actually yes. So if you see a piece, a sight reading piece, and say you're having a really tough time trying to get your pinky down to hit this note right here. Well, if you want, you can leave it out. Will it sound a little hollow? Sure. But if it allows you to play through the section from beginning to end, then do that. It's especially helpful if you're doing it for a teacher or some sort of audition to sometimes leave out some of these notes so that we can actually play the piece, and hopefully try to play the piece in its entirety. Don't let one note really mess you up. Maybe on the second playthrough, try to grab that note, but it's okay to leave out a note every once in a while if it's to reach the overall goal of playing the entire section. Next question, how long do you have to analyze the piece before you play? Well, again, if you're doing it for an audition, the answer is probably a minute or 2. That's how much time they gave us. But if you're by yourself, take as much time as you need. I'd rather have you play the right notes, right rhythms, that layered cake like we talked about, rather than just jumping into it, only giving yourself a minute if you really need more. So read the situation. If you're doing it on your own, you can take as much time as you want. And if you have more questions about sight reading, of course, after this lesson's over, mark this down. We meet generally Saturdays, sometimes Sundays, at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube live. And I would love, if you have any questions about sight reading, to come to our next live session and ask them. And hopefully I can help clarify some of your questions. Okay, it's time for the most important part of the lesson, where I'm basically going to give you my sight reading methodology. It's going to kind of combine all the stuff we've talked about today in one easy list, so that in case you're like, oh man, we talked about a lot of stuff, this is what you should focus on. Are you ready? Number one, get a sight reading book or piano lesson book that you haven't read through first so that you have plenty of sight reading material to read through. Next is you want to pick a passage out of that book, or in case of the sight reading book, just start going through the examples. And you generally want to sight read 1 or 2 examples per day. Next, you want to analyze for things like the time signature, key signature, and tricky passages. Remember when we did that? And remember, take as much time as you need. Remember that the way I do it is I like to play through once as a genuine sight read and then once again to correct as many mistakes as possible. Don't play it a third time because then you're just learning the piece at that point. And lastly, remember the point isn't to play through perfectly beginning to end. It's really to train yourself to look at new passages of music regularly. So remember, it's a long-term goal. If you are messing up here or there on some of these examples, that's okay. That's part of the experience. Sight reading is just one of many skills you need to learn on the piano. Some of the other ones include obviously the layout of the piano, how to read notes super duper fast, rhythm, that layered cake we talked about. And if you want to have a better idea on how to construct this layered cake and understand it and play music the best that you can, you want to actually check out this playlist I have right here for beginners. It's going to teach you all the basic stuff you need to know to become the best well-rounded musician you can. So it's been your piano teacher, Tim, here. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you for all those that have supported the channel over the years. I appreciate you so much. And I'll see you, yes, you, in the next lesson. Bye-bye.